Hi, welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today I'm going to be working with the beautiful collection called Lavender Lemonade. I'm going to show you that in just a moment. I'm also going to be working with some 18 gauge round wire and some quick links. Let's head down to the board and have a look at what we're going to make together, and then let's crack on with our project. So for today's project I'm going to be working with Lavender Lemonade. What an absolutely beautiful bead mix this is. All of those gorgeous, glorious springtime colours and a really playful look at different textures as well. So I'm going to pop that out of the way and I'll show you the project we're making. So it's this lovely long drop earring. Now you can transfer many of the skills from this project and make a much shorter variation if you like, but these are what I like to think of as shoulder grazers. That's what we're going to make together today. Let's just pop that up to one side. We're also going to be using some quick links, which are really, really handy to have. I'm going to be using my 6-step bail making pliers, and I'm probably going to be using step number 2, which is approximately 3 millimeters diameter across on that pin. So let's have a look at our wire. I've got a length here of around about 12 inches of 18 gauge wire. I'm working with copper coloured craft wire today. It doesn't really matter what kind of temper it is you're using. Very, very soft wire, probably not super advisable. So I'm going to give that a quick warm through between thumb and forefinger to get started. We need less than 12 inches in totality, but we are going to start by creating a couple of little charms. So let's trim away a short length of around about 2 inches to begin with. That's where we're going to start today. And I'm grabbing in those multi-step bail makers. Now you'll see that one end is nice and flush cut. That's where we're going to start. And I'm going to make a nice little loop with those bail making pliers. So if I rotate the wire around, you'll see that you get that loop shape. And what we're going to do is draw the rest of the wire away, like so. So you have this loop centered down at one end of that little section of wire. I'm going to make sure that I'm super happy with that shape and form. Give that a quick squish to make it nice and strong. And then I'm going to add in my lovely gorgeous, glossy, glitzy, golden toned insect charm down at the base. So I've just slipped that in to the little loop at the base, close that up nicely, and we're going to add in a series of beads. I've gone for a pair of these gorgeous lucite beads to begin with. This one's like a drop of golden honey, like the centre of a flower, and then we've got this genuinely gorgeous lavendery colour as well. Now I need to make another loop for this charm, and it needs to be in the same orientation as that lower loop. So if I hold it thus, you can see that the loop is flush to the desk, moving in the same direction as the desk, and I'm going to make another loop up at the top. Now if you don't have your 6-step bail makers, you can simply use round nose pliers, but these are really quite handy to have. Let's get the correct numbered bail making plier pin into position. So I've rotated the wire all the way around to create that loop, and I'm going to use my professional flush cutters to trim away, just allowing that to drop to the board for a second whilst I reform and close up that loop. So that's one of the components that we'll be using today. Very, very easy and quick to make, very, very handy charm. Something like that you can simply put onto an earring finding and you're good to go anyway. You don't have to do anything else to it. So the second part that we're going to make and then put to one side requires the same section of wire. We're just going to trim away to make sure that we have a flush end to work with. Always super important to take that extra moment. We're going to make another loop now. So let's grab those bail makers again. Create a little loop shape down at the bottom. I'm going to stick to using that number 2 on my bail makers. Draw the wire all the way around until you get that circular form. Then you can use any of your chain nose pliers just to get the wire to come away smoothly. Give that a little bit of a smooth down. and I'm happy with how that's looking. So I've been quite playful with my textures today. So I have some lucite, I've got glitzy gold in that lovely charm down at the bottom. I've got this sanded, almost sea glass-esque texture on this central feature bead. Then I have the most beautiful faceted citrine colour encased bezel fit drop. And I also have this really, really beautiful lilac-y, lavendery, very, very high shine faceted bead up at the top. So it's really good fun to play around with all of those different aspects of design. I'm going to add in that lovely, beautiful faceted, it's very, very chubby. It's somewhere between a rondelle and a round. Now for this section, I don't want those loops in the same orientation. I want them in a 90-degree opposing orientation. So what that means is if my loop is flat to the table, I need to draw the wire on the other side of the bead up and away so that they are at 90 degrees to one another. If I flip that around, you'll see that's coming sideways. So let's get those bail makers back into position and generate another loop. Up at the top of this section, draw that wire all the way around to generate a 90 degrees opposing loop. So again, with those professional flush cutters, if it's easier for you, you can just very, very gently open that out slightly to make that little cut, that little snip, before we close that up. Now with these loops, I want these to be super strong, so I'm going to give them a really good squish and a squeeze. I'm just pressing together with those flat faces of my pliers, and I'll do that on both sides of this lovely lavendery coloured bead. What I'm going to do next is open up one of those loops, doesn't really matter which one at this stage, and add in that bezel set citrine colour drop. It's absolutely glorious. It's a cushion cut. Really, really beautiful. Just closing that up as if I'm using that as a jump ring. And we've got another section ready and waiting to be used when we come to complete our segment in a little while. So for me, the fun part of this was linking the two quick links together at the same time as using a bead. So we're coming up on that section next. I've also got an earring finding. I'm just going to open that out slightly so that it's ready for us in just a moment. Now we do still have a tail of wire to work with. Far more than we need on that 12-inch length. From that 12-inch length, you're most likely to get probably all of this design done. I'm going to cut another short length now of around about 2.5 inches. And what I'm going to do is just to the side of the centre, I'm going to make an upwards bend in that wire. That just helps me move things along. I'm then going to add in this lovely sandblasted, almost sea glass-like effect bead onto the longer side. So down at the centre of the wire. Now because this is a glass bead, I want to be very careful that I'm not going to damage it. So I'm going to use the curved side of my bent chain nose pliers just to grip the wire, leaving a gap and creating an upright bend. Now rather than using my tool to close that up, I'm going to just gently draw those two lines together. So softly, softly, I'm going to just cross those two wires over above that centralised bead, before turning some right angles on those sections of wire. And I want that to occur just above the top of that beautiful sandblasted bead. Now you can play around with which beads you want to use in this design, completely transferable skills. And I'm going to put little bends on either side so that the wire just kind of nestles around on top of that central bead, our feature bead for today. But I still want that to be able to move, so you can still spin that around if you wish to. What I'm going to do now is just squish, open and close the pliers to put a little bit of strength and rigidity into those wires. I'm not terribly worried about marking them. If you are, however, you could use pliers that have a coating on them. The next thing I'm going to do is to grip just at the places where I made those angles change. And I'm going to very, very gently pull both of those wires forwards. Doesn't matter if they're slightly different angles at the moment, we're going to refine that in just a second. Now both of these need to be made into loops, and I would say do that individually one at a time. If you try to do that at the same time, you might end up marking the wire. You might also find that the one that's furthest away from the box joint doesn't move in exactly the same way. So it's actually quicker to just concentrate and do one manoeuvre at a time. Let's chase that all the way around. Might need to hold this because I've got a camera here. You won't have to worry about that. Just draw that tail across, and then I'll need to do the same thing on the far side with that number 2, which again is a 3mm pin. So I'm just going to rotate that wire around until I've got that shepherd's hook or shepherd's crook shape before taking the tail of the wire all the way around. So I've got what looks like 2 simple loops at the moment, and I'm going to trim those away with my professional flush cutters once, and let's get that other one done, making sure I'm using the flush side and just giving that a little bit of a snip, and then I will clear the board of the detritus over into the melt pot for later. Now this is a functional part of the design, so I'm going to take a little extra moment to get these loops flat, and then once I've got them closed up, I'm going to make sure that the angles are the same on both sides so that they match up neatly. So if you put one on top of the other, you'll see that they stack in the same orientation. I'm then going to give both of those loops a really good squeeze. Now the reason is I'm going to open them in a way that I wouldn't normally open a loop. I'm going to open them outwards rather than as a jump ring, purely because it's going to make showing you the next part of the design just a little bit easier. So squishy, 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 that's all nice and strong. I'm very, very gently going to tease both of those loops open without disrupting the actual shape that we've created. The next part involves taking those 2 quick links and putting them faceted side to faceted side, or diamond cut to diamond cut, and inserting both rings inside both hoops at the same time. So they are now sitting inside, and what we want to do is to close those loops back up. Now that's just an easier way of showing you. What you can do is open these loops as if they were jump rings. It will mean that your loops are a little bit stronger and they retain their shape better, but it's kind of tricky to show that to you on screen. So what we have now is our little beautiful, almost sea glass-esque bead acting as a connector. And what we're going to do is to drop that down to the board and just open it up. So you can see how we've connected those 2 quick links together. All it takes now is to assemble your project. Now you could play around with what goes where, but because I've made this drop quite long, if I put that up at the top, it's not going to look quite as pretty. But you could make it shorter and play around with the order of things. Now, when I mentioned opening a simple loop such as this, like a jump ring, this is what I mean. So I've got the open side just here. I'm going to just flip that up to one side, and then I'm going to add that to the bottom of the lower of my 2 quick links before closing that up again like a jump ring, and making sure that that's good and flat afterwards. So we've got the lowest part of the assembly is now done. So let's just pop up to the top and add this section. So the reason that we have the opposing angles on this piece is because what we're going to do, making sure that's nice and strong, is add this section onto the earring finding first, and then add the upper quick link into position, close the earring finding up, and you'll see that the dropper, that beautiful cushion faceted citrine looking piece, actually sits in the correct orientation. So there is your Lavender Lemonade mega drop earrings using those fabulous quick links and the really, very, very useful 6-step bail making pliers.